Most people assume vegetables need full sun to grow, hour after hour of it, bright, blazing, all-day light. But here's the surprising truth. Some of the most useful vegetables you can grow actually prefer shade. They sulk in harsh sun. They thrive in the cool, gentle light your balcony already gets. So if you've ever looked at your shady patio and thought, nothing will ever grow here, you were told wrong. That corner you wrote off, that north-facing balcony that only gets a few hours of soft morning light, it can feed you. And it can do it in pots, on concrete, with almost no effort. Think about how many people give up before they start. They look at a shaded apartment balcony, decide it's hopeless, and buy their greens at the store all year long, bag after bag of wilted lettuce, $4 here, $3 there, herbs in little plastic clamshells that rot in the fridge before you finish them. All that money, all that waste. For plants that would have grown happily right outside the door in the very light they said was too weak. Because here's what the seed rack marketing never tells you. Most leafy greens and many cool season vegetables only need 3 to 4 hours of direct light a day. Some do fine with bright, indirect light and no direct sun at all. The big tomato and pepper plants need that all-day blaze. But the everyday food you actually eat the most of, it would rather hide from it. So today we're counting down 15 shade-loving vegetables you can actually grow in pots on any balcony or patio, even the dim ones. We'll go from the simple and the fast all the way down to number one, which is a plant most people have never even considered, and yet it can keep feeding you for years after a single planting. Plant it once, harvest it season after season. We'll get there. Before we start, do something quick for me. In the comments, tell me which way your balcony or patio faces. North, south, east, or west. That one detail tells you almost everything about what will thrive. And I want to help you read your own space. All right, let's get started. At number 15, we begin with radishes. Most people think of radishes as a sun crop, lined up in long garden rows. But radishes are one of the fastest, most forgiving things you can grow in a shady pot. In fact, too much heat and harsh sun make them turn woody and split and push them to flower before the root ever swells. Here's the simple science. A radish is a cool season root. It does its real work when the soil stays cool and damp. In a hot, sun-baked bed, the plant panics, races to make seed, and forgets about the crisp root you actually want. Dappled shade keeps the soil temperature down, which keeps the plant calm, which keeps it focused on growing that round, peppery bulb. To grow them, you barely need anything. A pot just 6 inches deep will do. Fill it with regular potting mix, not garden dirt, because loose mix lets the root push out evenly and round. Scatter the seeds, cover them with about 1/2 inch of soil, and keep that soil damp, like a wrung-out sponge. In as little as 25 to 30 days, you're pulling radishes. With 3 to 4 hours of gentle light, they'll deliver. The single most common mistake, crowding. People dump the whole seed packet in one pot and end up with leaves and no roots. Thin them, so each radish has about 1 inch of breathing room, and you'll be rewarded. And radishes are just the warm-up, because if a root crop can handle shade, you might be wondering what else can, which brings us to something a little hardier. At number 14, we have bush beans. Now, beans are famous sun lovers, and the big yields really do want full sun. But here's what surprises people. Bush beans will still produce a respectable harvest in partial shade, especially the soft, bright light of a morning-facing balcony. You won't get a record crop. You'll get plenty for a small household from a single pot. Why do they manage it? Beans carry a quiet trick in their roots. They work with tiny soil bacteria to pull nitrogen out of the air and feed themselves. That means they don't depend on rich, constantly fertilized soil the way hungrier plants do. So even when light is limited and growth is slower, the plant keeps quietly building pods on its own fuel. Choose a bush variety, not a pole type, so you don't need a big trellis. A pod about 8 to 10 inches deep and a foot wide is perfect. Plant the seeds an inch down, water them in, and keep the soil evenly moist once the flowers appear, because that's when thirsty plants drop their pods. Give them the brightest spot your shade has to offer, ideally a few hours of direct morning sun. The mistake to avoid is overwatering before they sprout. Beans sitting in cold, soggy soil simply rot damp, not drenched. Let them come up, and they'll handle the rest. And speaking of plants that pull sweetness out of cool, low-light conditions, that leads us straight to a root that actually tastes better in the shade. At number 13, beets. Here's something most gardeners never realize. When you grow a beet in partial shade, you're not just growing the root, you're growing two crops in one pot. The deep, earthy beet root below and the glossy, colorful beet greens above, which are every bit as edible as chard and arguably more nutritious. And shade is the secret to those greens. In blazing sun, beet leaves get tough and bitter, and the plant pours its energy into surviving the heat. In cooler, shadier light, the leaves stay tender and mild, and the plant takes its slow, steady time, forming a sweet root underneath. Beets want a pot at least 8 inches deep, because that root needs room to drop down. Use loose potting mix. Sow the seeds about ½ an inch deep. And here's a detail worth knowing. Each wrinkled beet seed is actually a little cluster of several seeds. So you'll almost always need to thin the seedlings. Snip the extras with scissors instead of pulling so you don't disturb the ones you keep. Then harvest a few outer leaves anytime you want a salad while the root keeps growing below. With 3 to 4 hours of light and consistent water, you'll have beets in about 50 to 60 days. And because you're already eating the greens along the way, nothing is wasted while you wait. Now, if tender, mild leaves are what shade does best, then the next plant is where shade truly shines, because this one turns bitter the instant the sun gets too strong. At number 12, arugula. Most people buy arugula in those expensive little bags and have no idea how absurdly easy it is to grow at home. And here's the twist. Arugula is one of the few vegetables that's actually better in shade than in sun. Full sun makes it bolt fast and turn sharp and unpleasantly bitter. Shade keeps it nutty, tender, and mild, the way the good stuff tastes. The reason is bolting. Arugula is a cool, fast-growing green, and heat plus strong light is its alarm bell to flower and go to seed. Once it bolts, the leaves turn harsh. Keep it cool and shaded, and it stays in leaf-producing mode far longer, giving you weeks of harvest instead of days. You can grow arugula in a pot as shallow as 6 inches or even a window box. Scatter the seeds across the surface, barely cover them, and keep the soil moist. In about 20 days, you can start snipping baby leaves. Cut them an inch above the soil with scissors, and the plant grows right back for a second and third cutting. They call this cut and come again, and it means one sowing feeds you for a month. A north-facing balcony that gets no direct sun at all, arugula will often still grow there in bright shade. That's how little it asks. And that same gentle, no direct sunlight is exactly where our next plant finally stops being so difficult, because in full sun, most people kill it in a week. At number 11, cilantro. If you've ever grown cilantro on a hot sunny sill and watched it shoot up, flower, and die within 2 weeks, you are not a bad gardener. You simply gave it too much sun. And this is the great cilantro secret. It is a cool weather herb that hates heat, and partial shade is what finally lets it last. Here's why. Cilantro's whole instinct in warmth and bright light is to bolt, to rush toward making seed, which we call coriander. Once it bolts, leaf production stops. By growing it in cooler shade, you slow that clock dramatically, and the plant keeps making the soft, flavorful leaves you actually want for weeks longer. Use a pot about 8 inches deep, because cilantro has a taproot and resents being crowded or transplanted. Sow the seeds right where they'll grow. Cover them lightly and keep the soil consistently damp. Snip the outer leaves as you need them. And here's a trick gardeners swear by. Sow a small pinch of fresh seed every 2 to 3 weeks. That way, as one batch starts to fade, the next is already coming up and you never run out. 3 to 4 hours of soft light, or even just bright shade, is plenty. Now, if a fussy herb like cilantro can settle down in the shade, then the next one is going to feel almost effortless, because it might be the hardest vegetable on this entire list to kill. At number 10, green onions, also called scallions. Here's a fact that delights people the first time they try it. You can grow green onions from the kitchen scraps you were about to throw away. Those white root ends you chop off and toss, stand them in a little water or push them into a pot, and they regrow for free in the shade. The reason is that a green onion isn't really trying to make a big bulb the way a regular onion does. You're harvesting the green tops and the slender white shaft, and those grow from energy already stored in the base. The plant doesn't need intense, all-day sun to swell a bulb. It just needs enough light to push up fresh green blades, and a few hours of soft light does that easily. Take the root ends, the bottom inch with the little roots still attached, and plant them upright in a pot, roots down, just covering the white part. Keep the soil moist. Within days, you'll see new green shoots climbing up. Snip what you need with scissors and leave the roots in the pot, and they regrow again and again. One pot can supply a kitchen for months. This is the kind of plant that turns a shady corner into a quiet little grocery store. And if regrowing food from scraps appeals to you, the next one is a leafy green that practically begs to be cut over and over. At number 9, Swiss chard. Most people walk right past chard at the garden center, not realizing it's one of the most beautiful and productive shade vegetables you can grow. Those glowing stems of pink, gold, and red aren't just for looks. Chard is a close cousin of the beet, bred for its leaves, and it brings that same tolerance for cool, shaded conditions. Here's what makes it special in a pot. Chard is a true cut-and-come-again plant. You don't harvest the whole thing at once. You snap off the outer leaves, and the center keeps pushing new ones for months. A single chard plant can feed you steadily through an entire season, and in mild climates, it'll keep going even longer. And unlike spinach or lettuce, it doesn't bolt and quit the moment things warm up. It's far more patient. Give chard a slightly bigger pot, about 10 to 12 inches deep, because it grows into a substantial plant. Use rich potting mix, keep it watered, and harvest the outer leaves once they're the size of your hand. Always leave the small inner leaves to keep the plant producing. 3 to 4 hours of light keeps it happy, and bright shade will still get you a harvest. Now I want to pause here for a moment, because some of you watching already have a garden. maybe years of experience, maybe a full backyard bed, and you might be thinking none of this container talk applies to you. It does. Here's something you can do this very weekend with nothing you don't already own. Take that one stubborn shady strip along your fence or behind the house, the spot where tomatoes always sulked, and plant chard or arugula or scallions there instead. You've been fighting that shade for years. Stop fighting it. Match the plant to the light you actually have, and that dead zone becomes your most productive corner. And if you're a nervous beginner thinking this all sounds advanced, notice how simple every single step has been. A pot, some mix, a few seeds, water. That's it. You really can't mess this up. And that brings us to a green that looks delicate but is tougher than almost anything on this list. At number 8, bok choy. This one surprises Western gardeners constantly. Bok choy, the crisp little cabbage of stir-fries, is a cool season champion that genuinely prefers shade over sun. Plant it somewhere too bright and warm, and it does the thing all these greens do. It bolts, sends up a flower stalk, and turns bitter before you've harvested a single meal. The science is the same story we keep seeing. Bok choy evolved for cool growing seasons. Heat and intense light trigger it to flower early. Shade calms that signal, keeps the plant in leaf and stalk mode, and lets those thick, juicy white stems develop the way they should. Cooler conditions literally buy you more harvest time. You can grow baby bok choy in a pot just 6 to 8 inches deep, and it matures fast, often in about 45 days. Sow the seeds, thin the seedlings to give each plant a few inches, keep the soil evenly moist, and harvest either by taking outer leaves or cutting the whole compact head at the base. With 3 to 4 hours of gentle light, it thrives. If you've never grown an Asian green before, this is the one to start with, and it pairs perfectly with our next plant, another tender green that the heat absolutely ruins, but the shade protects. At number 7, parsley. People treat parsley as a garnish and never think to grow it, but it's one of the most rewarding shade herbs you can keep in a pot. And unlike cilantro, which races to bolt, parsley is a biennial, which means it naturally takes 2 years to flower. So it stays in leaf-producing mode for a long, long time, giving you a steady supply without rushing to seed. In shade, parsley stays lush and deep green and never gets that scorched, papery look that full afternoon sun can cause. It tolerates low light remarkably well, which is why it's one of the few herbs that grows reliably indoors on a windowsill, too. Give it a pot about 8 inches deep for its taproot, keep the soil moist, and harvest by cutting the outer stems right down at the base, never just topping it off. Cutting from the outside tells the plant to keep generating new growth from the center. One well-tended parsley plant can supply a kitchen for an entire year. The main thing to know is that parsley seed is slow to sprout, sometimes 3 weeks, so be patient and don't assume it failed. Slow and steady, generous and forgiving. And from one patient producer, we move to the green that practically begs for shade, because sun is the very thing that makes it quit. At number 6, spinach. Here's the heartbreak every spinach grower knows. You plant it, it looks gorgeous, and then the first warm, sunny stretch arrives, and it shoots straight up and goes to seed, all in a matter of days. That's bolting. And sun and heat are the trigger, which is exactly why spinach is a dream crop for a shady balcony. Spinach is one of the most cold-tolerant, shade-friendly vegetables there is. In cooler, lower light, it stays in its leafy rosette far longer, giving you weeks of thick, tender, dark green leaves instead of a sudden rush to flower. The shade doesn't hold it back. The shade is what saves it. A pot 6 to 8 inches deep is plenty. Sow the seeds, ½ inch down, keep them cool and damp, and start harvesting outer leaves once they're big enough to pick. Treat it as cut and come again, taking the outer leaves and leaving the center, and one sowing keeps producing. Spinach is rich in iron and folate, and a couple of pots can genuinely replace those store-bought bags that wilt so fast. The trick is timing. Spinach loves the cool shoulders of the year, spring and fall, far more than midsummer. Lean into that, and it rewards you. And if you like the idea of a green that laughs at cold and shade, the next one takes that toughness even further. At number 5, kale. Kale has a reputation for being indestructible, and in the shade, it mostly is. But here's the part people don't know. Shade can actually make your kale taste better. Harsh sun and heat can push kale toward bitterness, while cooler, shadier conditions keep the leaves milder and sweeter, especially after a light chill. Kale is a member of the cabbage family built for cool weather, and it just keeps going. It's a true cut-and-come-again plant on a grand scale. Harvest the lower, outer leaves, and the plant keeps growing taller from the center, producing for months. In many regions, it survives straight through winter, handing you fresh greens when nothing else is growing. Use a pot at least 10 inches deep, because kale develops a strong root system and a tall, sturdy stem. Keep it watered and harvest from the bottom up, taking the oldest leaves first and always leaving the top cluster intact. 3 to 4 hours of light keeps it productive, and it tolerates bright shade better than almost any other vegetable here. 1 or 2 kale plants in pots can supply greens for an astonishingly long stretch of the year. And if longevity is what impresses you, then the next plant takes that idea and runs with it, because once you have it, you may never need to buy it again. At number 4, lettuce. Lettuce might be the single most perfect shade vegetable in existence, and here's why. Sun is its enemy. In bright, hot light, lettuce turns bitter, wilts, and bolts to seed almost overnight. In cool shade, it stays sweet, crisp, and tender, and it lasts. Growers in hot climates deliberately build shade just to keep lettuce alive through summer. You may already have that shade for free. The biology is simple. Lettuce is a cool season, shallow-rooted leaf crop. It doesn't need deep soil or intense light. It needs steady moisture and protection from heat. Give it those, and it's one of the fastest, most generous things you can grow. You can grow lettuce in a pot as shallow as 6 inches, or a wide, low bowl, or a window box. Choose a loose leaf or cut-and-come-again variety rather than a tight head. Scatter the seeds, barely cover them, and keep the soil damp. Harvest the outer leaves, and the plant keeps refilling from the center. 1 shallow container can supply salads for weeks, and a few staggered pots can supply them all season. Picture it. You walk out to your shady balcony, snip a bowl of fresh leaves minutes before dinner, and you never buy another bag that slowly turns to slime in the crisper drawer. And if growing your own greens for pennies appeals to you, the next plant is one you'll plant a single time and harvest from for years. At number 3, mustard greens. Mustard greens are an old southern staple that far too many gardeners have forgotten, and they are tailor-made for shady pots. They're fast, they're peppery, and they actually mellow in cool shade, where full sun would make them aggressively hot and quick to bolt. What makes them shine in low light is sheer speed and toughness. Mustard greens grow quickly even in cooler conditions, shrugging off light frosts that would flatten more delicate plants. That means a shady balcony in spring or fall becomes a steady source of spicy, vitamin-rich greens for cooking or salads long after the warm weather crops have given up. Grow them in a pot 6 to 8 inches deep. Sow the seeds shallowly, keep them moist, and harvest the outer leaves young and tender for salads, or let them grow larger to cook down like collards or spinach. As with so many on this list, take the outer leaves and leave the center, and one planting keeps producing for weeks. They're rich in vitamins A, C, and K, and they ask for almost nothing in return. Fast, bold, and forgiving. But now we move from the quick crops to the ones that reward patience, because the final two plants on this list keep giving back season after season, year after year, and the very next one is famous for never, ever quitting. At number 2, mint. Mint is the plant that turns a shady corner into an endless supply. It is so vigorous, so eager, that the real challenge isn't growing it, it's containing it, which is exactly why a pot is the perfect home for it. And here's the key fact. Mint genuinely prefers partial shade. Hot, direct sun stresses it and can scorch the leaves, while cool, shaded conditions are where it grows luscious and most fragrant. Mint is a perennial, which means it doesn't die at the end of the season the way lettuce or beans do. It goes dormant and returns on its own year after year from the same roots. Plant it once, and that pot can supply you with mint for tea, for cooking, for cold drinks, for many years to come. Always, always grow mint in its own container, never sharing a pot with other plants, because those underground runners will take over everything. A pot about 10 inches wide is ideal. Keep the soil moist, give it bright shade or a few hours of soft light, and harvest by pinching off sprigs from the top, which makes the plant grow bushier instead of leggy. The more you cut it, the more it gives. One pot, years of harvest, almost no effort. And that idea of planting once and harvesting for years is exactly what makes our number 1 so special, because it's a vegetable hardly anyone grows, and it might be the most perfect shade plant of them all. And that brings us to number 1, sorrel. Most people have never even heard of sorrel, and that's a quiet shame, because it may be the single best kept secret in shade gardening. Sorrel is a leafy green with a bright, lemony, tangy flavor, and unlike nearly every other vegetable on this list, it is a hardy perennial. You plant it one time, and it comes back on its own every single spring for years. Some gardeners report harvesting from the same sorrel plant for a decade or more. Think about what that means. Lettuce and spinach and arugula are wonderful, but you re-sow them again and again. Sorrel asks for one planting. After that, it's simply there in its pot, waking up each spring before almost anything else is ready, handing you fresh, zesty greens when the rest of the garden is still bare. It's one of the very first edible plants of the year. And here's the beautiful part. For our purposes, sorrel loves partial shade. It tolerates cool, low-light conditions exceptionally well, and shade keeps its leaves tender and mild instead of letting them turn tough. That north-facing balcony, the dim patio, the spot you were sure was useless, that's precisely where sorrel feels at home. Growing it could not be simpler. Give it a pot about 10 to 12 inches deep so the perennial roots have room to settle in for the long haul. Fill it with good potting mix, plant your sorrel, and keep the soil consistently moist. Harvest the outer leaves whenever you want that bright lemony tang in a salad, a soup, or a sauce, and always leave the center to keep producing. In the heat of midsummer, it may slow down or try to flower, and the simple move is to snip off any flower stalks, which tells the plant to keep making leaves instead of seed. When cold weather comes, it dies back, rests, and returns again on its own. There's a real elegance to it. While everyone else is buying seedlings and resowing pots every few weeks, your sorrel just keeps showing up year after year, asking for nothing but a little water and the shade you already have. One plant, one pot, a decade of harvests. That's the kind of quiet abundance a shady balcony was made for. So here's the real lesson hiding inside all 15 of these plants. Successful growing was never about having the most sun or the biggest yard or the most expensive setup. It's about matching the right plant to the light you actually have. That shady corner isn't a problem to be solved. It's an opportunity most people walk right past. The sun-loving tomatoes get all the attention, but the everyday food you eat the most, the greens and the herbs, quietly prefers the cool, gentle light you already own. You don't need more space. You need smarter plants. And the goal was never a perfect garden. It's a consistent one. A few well-chosen pots that hand you something fresh week after week with almost no fuss. If you're the kind of person who'd rather grow real food simply in the space you already have than overspend and overwork for it, then you're exactly who these plants are for. A handful of pots, a shady balcony, and dinner that starts just outside your door. So tell me in the comments right now, which way does your balcony or patio face, north, south, east, or west? Drop it below and tell me which of these 15 you're going to try first. I read them, and I'll help you match the plant to your light. Go ahead and leave that comment before you forget. And if you'd like to keep growing more food with less space and less effort, consider subscribing, and you'll be part of a calm, growing community that does exactly that. Because next time, we're looking at the vegetables you can plant once in the fall and harvest straight through the winter, even when there's frost on the railing, and there's one in particular that gets sweeter the colder it gets. I'll see you there. Now that you know what grows in the shade, let me show you the vegetables and herbs that actually do better in pots than in the ground. It's starting right here, so stay with me.